Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. India is one of the few established democracies where defamation is still a criminal offence. This is because it's part of the Indian Penal Code, which predates the Constitution by almost 90 years. But has the time come to rethink this colonial era law? With me to answer that question is Supreme Court lawyer and MP KTS Tulsi, the founding editor of TheWire.in, Siddharth Varadarajan, and joining us shortly, BJP spokesperson Aman Sinha. Mr. Tulsi, let me start with a simple question of principle. Defamation is something that happens between two individuals or two private entities. Now, if you have a law on criminal defamation, that permits one of them to use the state's coercive police powers as a remedy. Is that justified? Or would you say those are grounds for perhaps abolishing or limiting criminal defamation?
Of course. No. That way, murder also happens between two individuals. One person causes the murder of another. And accident is also between two individuals. Dacoity is between two individuals. You see, those are offences against human body. The reputation is more precious than my limb. I might as well, its reputation is so precious to an individual. It takes you a lifetime to build it, and in cases of companies it takes you many lifetimes to build, and yet you just run it into ground. Okay. And we say that it's not a criminal offence. Tort law in India is so underdeveloped that it takes you a lifetime to get any damages, and minuscule damages. We haven't evolved a tradition like in England, which has become the libel capital of the world. Okay. We don't have law of torts which can decide quickly. The only case I remember was where the photograph, the wrong photograph of one of the judges, ex-judges of the Supreme Court was shown.
Well, yes, maybe, but let me bring in Siddharth Varadarajan. You've heard Mr. Tulsi knock down the argument that I presented in terms of principle. Let me present to you, Siddharth Varadarajan, an argument in terms of impact. Do you accept that criminal defamation intimidates citizens and, worse still, dissuades them from exposing wrongdoing, particularly when you bear in mind the fact that truth is not a defense unless you can demonstrate that the revelation was in the public good? Does it therefore have what they call a chilling effect on free speech and exposure of wrongdoing?
Undoubtedly it does. I mean, if you look at the way in which criminal defamation cases are filed here, who files them, the kind of issues on which, particularly those in power, I mean, chief ministers, state governments tend to file criminal defamation cases, or police acting on behalf of those in authority, it's very clear that this is a law that is liable to rampant abuse. And I can tell you as an editor that, the chilling effect this has on journalists, on editors, in reporting, factual information about people in authority, information that may show them in bad light in the eyes of their electorate. This is something that is tangible. I mean, I have myself criminal defamation cases pending against me filed by the state of Tamil Nadu on behalf of Chief Minister Jayalalitha, simply for reporting press conference remarks made by the leader of the opposition that she didn't like. So this is the kind of use that we are witnessing in India that is being made of the law of criminal defamation, and I think it's high time that the courts act against this and just remove it from our statute books.
Aman Sinha, we have two very divergent, if not polar opposite views on whether criminal defamation should be abolished or whether it should be retained. Mr. Tulsi believes that defamation affects the body perhaps more seriously than actual physical injury, because defamation affects reputation, which is a prized commodity. Therefore, he wishes to retain criminal defamation. Siddharth Varadarajan, on the other hand, points out that criminal defamation has a chilling impact on free speech. It's misused by politicians. He quoted the example of his own case where Jayalalitha brought criminal defamation cases against him because he simply quoted what the leader of the opposition had said at a press conference. Where do you stand on this issue of whether criminal defamation should be retained or abolished?
Oh, Karan, to any person, his respect, honor and dignity is the most important thing. Article 21 of the Constitution also guarantees to every citizen right to live life with dignity and honor. And therefore, I believe that Section 499, which is the Section 499 of IPC, is an important provision. It should be there on the statute book. And reputation and respect, they take a lifetime to build. But, you know, one mindless or senseless act can, you know, demolish those reputation. And let me point out, Karan, that Section 499 of IPC is the section which has the maximum number of exceptions or the maximum number of safeguards. About 10 safeguards are stipulated there. Okay. So therefore, each and every precaution has been taken. And let me also point out, Karan, that the same very Article 19, Article 19(2) makes clearly states that states are empowered. It's the right to free speech is not an absolute right. There can be reasonable restrictions imposed by the state. And Article 19(2) clearly states and mandates
You're talking about restrictions on behalf of individuals.
Yes. No, I'm not. It is a Section 499 of IPC is a restriction which has a reasonable restriction as in accordance to Article 19(2) of the Constitution, and which has been imposed by the state. So therefore, it is not a restriction which an individual is imposing. Let me also point out, Karan, that if there are issues between two. May I just complete one point that you were raising, important point, that it's a dispute between two individuals, so why should criminal? Yeah, the point is that there's a dispute between husband and wife is also a dispute between two individuals. Why is there a provision for cruelty? Even mental cruelty is there. Trespass is also a provision which is civil as well as criminal. There are large number of such provisions, and the reality of today's age and time is that civil action takes a whole lot of time. Karan, you know the reality of our judicial system also. It will at least take 20 years. And will a person wait for 20 years to get back his lost reputation and respect?
Let me bring in Mr. Tulsi and I'll come back to you in a moment's time. Mr. Tulsi, what about the argument made very forcefully by Siddharth Varadarajan that criminal defamation is misused primarily to ensure that journalists don't report wrongdoing, primarily to protect, in fact, people who should be exposed, and therefore it not only has a chilling effect on freedom of speech, it actually protects people who do criminal acts because defamation can be used against them. More importantly, and this is the second thing I want to put to you, defamation is also used to harass. Multiple cases are filed in courts spread out across the length and breadth of this country so that people keep running from court to court. Those are two good reasons, two good examples of misuse why it should either be read down or abolished.
No. Every law is misused. The Supreme Court has ad nauseum said that the cases of dowry, cruelty on account of dowry, are misused grossly. The entire families are implicated, and you see, what is the conviction rate? The conviction rate for all the penal offences, IPC offences as well as the special law offences, it's abysmal. It's 4% of the cases which are reported in the police station. Defamation is a bailable offence. Defamation is, so you don't have to run for getting a bail. You get exemption for personal appearance for the asking. Now, how is it such a draconian law? It's not a draconian law. There are so many other draconian laws that the sexual harassment, the rape, etc. has been tightened to an extent that you don't have a hope.
Okay.
They become completely one-sided. But this is a law which has 10 exceptions. And if I may quickly run down some of those exceptions. Truth is a perfect defense.
We know what the exceptions are.
It's the first exception to Section 499. The first exception.
Don't run through the list of exceptions. We know what they are. I want to raise with Siddharth the opposite issue. Siddharth, you're pointing out that this is in fact a law that is misused. You're pointing out this is a law that in fact has a chilling effect on freedom of speech. And worse still, it has a chilling effect on the right of journalists to expose wrongdoing. But what about the claim made in the Supreme Court by the government for retaining the law? I want to get you to answer that. First of all, they say you need criminal defamation because in India, most people do not have the liquidity to actually pay damages for civil defamation. In other words, the people who do the defaming don't have the money to pay the damages, therefore the only punishment they can get is a jail term, hence criminal defamation is needed. And the government adds to that a second argument that in the internet age, the only remedy that is effective for online defamation is criminal offence, not civil defamation. How do you respond to those two arguments?
No, these arguments are disingenuous, and I'm afraid it represents an attempt by the state to bring back onto the statute books the kind of powers they enjoyed under Section 66 of the IT Act, which the Supreme Court struck down, and to do that through the back door. The fact of the matter is, you see, Mr. Tulsi can be, is quite dismissive of the kind of burden that somebody against whom a defamation case is filed has to discharge. He says, you just have to make one appearance and you get an exemption. I can tell you from experience, being summoned to a city halfway across the country for something completely ridiculous. In one case against me, when I was editor of the Hindu, there was a factual story on a Hyderabad politician. And because it showed him in bad light in the eyes of his supporters, a defamation case was filed. I had to schlep all the way to Hyderabad. This is the kind of process. And the recent example in Bombay, where the Bombay police filed a defamation case against some gentleman who posted a photograph on Facebook of the chief minister, and he claimed wrongly that Fadnavis was on vacation in America, whereas it was actually some other picture of some other situation. But the police went ahead and filed a defamation case without getting an order from the magistrate, without a complaint from the chief minister. So the fact of the matter is, just as Section 66 was abused, the law of criminal defamation is abused, and it's abused by those in authority. Please, I want to underline this fact, that it's not some random citizen who feels he's been defamed who is running around invoking the law of criminal defamation. More often than not, it is people in authority. There was a recent example of a Hyderabad police
you made the point. Let me stop you there. I want to bring in Mr. Sinha, because Mr. Sinha, like Mr. Tulsi, you were arguing that this is a very balanced law. It has, as you said, 10 exceptions that ensure that, in fact, the law can't be abused. In response, I want to quote to you from today's leader in the Hindu, which points out that magistrates frequently summon defendants without first assessing whether any of the 10 exceptions to Section 499 apply. In other words, magistrates add to the harassment because they do not apply their judicial mind before summoning defendants. In other words, those exceptions may exist on paper and give someone like you assurance the law won't be abused, but magistrates don't actually apply their mind and don't apply those exceptions, and therefore add to the harassment. That's another reason why this law should be scrapped.
No, that's not a case for scrapping the law, Karan. That's a case for, some minor, fine-tuning in the law. And let me also point out that the government, from its own side, has referred the matter to Law Commission, which will collect views from all these stakeholders and will come out with a structured proposal as to what should be the exact nature of the Section 499 and Section 500 of the IPC. Now, let me also at the same time point out that this is the statute which has the maximum number of safeguards, as we were discussing, and therefore all possible precautions have been taken. Therefore, its constitutionality is very difficult to assail. And as I pointed out, Karan, that the Article 19(2) of the Constitution itself envisages a position where reasonable restrictions have to be imposed on absolute right to freedom of speech, which is not there, in fact. And this is a part of that reasonable restriction. And let me point out a contrarian example.
No, don't. I need to bring others in. Keep your answer short, Ahmed.
But for instance,
keep your answer short.
No,
I need to bring others in.
Short point, Karan, short point. Suppose if there is a lady whose character is being assassinated, if a Dalit is there who's being, somebody is trying to abuse him, should these not be a criminal offences? prima facie on face of it. So therefore, it's very easy to say and,
right.
just
You've made your point. I'm stopping you there. You've made your point. I want to bring in Mr. Tulsi. Mr. Tulsi, you're arguing like Aman Sinha in favor of retention. India, however, has ratified the United Nations International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights. India also accepts, acknowledges and has ratified several resolutions of the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and all of them do not permit criminalization of defamation. So as long as you keep retaining this on our statute book, you are in defiance and in breach of covenants and resolutions that you have signed up to. It makes us a mockery of a state. And also, bear in mind, most major established democracies have scrapped criminal defamation.
Well, they have, but they have very developed law of torts, and matters are resolved in a matter of days or months, not decades. You see, we have to understand that media cannot claim itself to be above the law. Media says that this is a professional hazard for the media.
But it mustn't be made a victim of the law either,
number of cases against the media publication. No, it's not.
Can I give you an example of why this is a bad law? Can I give you an example why this is a bad law? Let me give you an example why this is Mr. Tulsi. Let me give you an example why this is a bad law.
Yes.
Under the exceptions, in a very limited and only in a very limited sense can truth be a defense, on the proviso that that truth is for the greater public good. Now, this is a country where the motto of the nation is Satyamev Jayate, let truth prevail. But when it comes to criminal defamation, truth can't prevail unless you can prove it's in the public good. Now, that's why I say to you, this is not just a bad law, it's a law that makes a mockery of our national slogan.
I'm sorry, there is a misconception. No, I'm sorry. Truth is always for the public good. Truth is an absolute defense for defamation. It was only in the contempt law that truth was not allowed as a valid defense. There also the law has been changed. Truth is an absolute defense. It will always be for public good. You don't have to show anything further. If the imputation is true,
in the
that's the end of the matter.
Subramaniam Swamy actually made the point I'm making to you. To the judges hearing this case, he said, it is a peculiar anomaly that truth is not a full-fledged defense, that truth has to be predicated on the claim it's in the public good. And he made the point that I'm quoting, that this makes a mockery of our national slogan, Satyamev Jayate. And the judges of the Supreme Court heard that argument without demur.
Well, very well, they have heard, they are yet to decide. And I am saying that truth will always be for the public good. No one can ever argue that speaking the truth was an offense of defamation. This has never been held, not in any case, and nobody will be heard. And I do want to say, media must not think that how can a lowly magistrate summon such a big journalist. No. You see, the magistrate also represents the authority of the Constitution, the rule of law.
It's when he misrepresents or misuses it that people have concern.
Even for the first appearance.
You see, this is the point you're overlooking, and I want to come to Siddharth Varadarajan with that point, is that this argument is being reduced, if I can use that phrase, by Mr. Tulsi into a position that journalists take because they see it as a danger to their profession and they want to protect themselves from the use of criminal defamation. Is this only an issue of concern to people like you and me and other scribes? Or is it a wider issue that matters much more deeply to our country and our countrymen as a whole?
I think it affects anybody who is in the job of speaking truth to power. Whether you are a journalist, whether you are an author or a cultural performer, or perhaps a politician, the fact of the matter is that we should look at the case history of criminal defamation in India. The fact of the matter is that, Mr. Sinha may say that, well, the law is there to protect a woman or protect a Dalit from being criminally defamed. Let's look at the practice. In practice, you had the son of the President of India defame the women protesters in Delhi, calling them painted, dented women for coming out and protest about what happened in the Delhi gang rape. no, it doesn't occur to anybody to invoke the law of criminal defamation against him or the various politicians or police chiefs who regularly defame Indian women day in, day out, or who attack Dalits, or who take, who offend the sensibilities or the reputation of people who are less powerful than them. The fact of the matter is that this is a law that is designed in reality to punish weaker people who speak truth to power, not necessarily through a completed process, but through the process of trial, through the process of lengthy hearings in different parts of the country, so the process is the punishment in this case, and it has a chilling effect on anybody, not just journalists, but if you look now at the fact that the internet has given a voice.
I'm going to stop you, Siddharth, because you had a good point that you made against Mr. Aman Sinha. I want him very quickly, literally only Mr. Sinha in 10 seconds, because we're out of time already. He pointed out, Siddharth Varadarajan, that this law of defamation is never used against powerful politicians. He named one in particular, it happens to be the president's son, who makes remarks that defame women. It's only used by powerful politicians against journalists or against poor people who don't have any other defense. It's that element of arbitrary usage that again reinforces the argument for abolition. 10 seconds to answer, sir, because we're out of time.
No, Karan, if you look at the evidence, it is to the contrary. In fact, politicians have been at the receiving end of Section 499 and Section 500. I don't want to get into details, but let me also point out at the same time that it is for protection of all the Indians, and more so the common Indian, the ordinary man, because he does not have the means of the medium of media to go and publicize what his perspective is, with what his side of story is. So therefore he can come into the court and he can put his side of story. So it is absolutely to the contrary. In fact, this is for protection of somebody like Varadarajan D, like me, like you. Anybody can tomorrow perhaps need to avail make use of Section 499 and Section 500.
All right,
so therefore that should not
I'm
be the
stopping
case.
you. We're running out of time. I'll leave you with that last word. You claim this is a law that protects the poor man. Often it is the poor man himself who feels he's a victim of the law, but clearly this is one of those contentious issues over which Indian society will be deeply divided for a long time to come, and no matter where and how that Supreme Court case ends, at least something like one half of this country will feel aggrieved and let down. My thanks to my guests for joining me.